It was a great disappointment to me when we got that freedom, and after I had found myself working as a AIDS activist, to find that suddenly I was pitched against the very leadership and parts of the very government that I had fought for. And we may have looked like we were confident publicly, and when we spoke to the media, there was times of quite serious self-doubt about what we were doing, the correctness of what we were doing, and how we were cutting ourselves off. What carried us through was that TAC leaders always stayed in touch with communities. And there, the story was very different. There we found only support and affirmation. I think underlying it maybe was a faith that the principles that drove the liberation struggle, even though they were lost for a period of time because of Thabo Mbeki's AIDS denialism, would find their way back to the surface, and that at some point perhaps we would be acknowledged for the stand that we took.
You mentioned in your book that one of the strengths of the TAC was its very high and visible media profile. But you also mentioned that one of the weaknesses was that most of the reporting focused on sound bites or on quotes or stories about yourself and Zaki Ahmed, and that as a result, many of the heroes of the TAC struggle are largely unknown. Why did this happen?
Zaki and I were media savvy. We were experienced political campaigners, and that was to the advantage of the TAC. We took a lot of trouble to take journalists through an understanding of HIV. But it did have a price, and the price was, one, that it made the TAC often look as if it was a coloured man and a white man, which wasn't great in South Africa, given our racial dynamics. It opened us up to accusations and attacks. But I think the bigger cost was actually that it hid the real heroes of the response to HIV.
So who were the real heroes then?
The real heroes were often young black women who lived with HIV. They were the heroes because they worked in communities where they faced stigma, where they were sometimes ostracized from their own families. And it was their day-to-day work mastering HIV, grappling with their own HIV status, explaining HIV to a next-door neighbor or to a friend or to a comrade, that turned TAC from a handful of middle-class activists into a movement of working-class, poor, predominantly black, predominantly women.
Today, the very heroes that you mentioned now have become the largest victims of HIV because it's spreading so much faster among particularly young African women.
The face of HIV today is a young woman of about 16 or 17, black and poor. That should also be the coalface of our efforts to stop HIV.